am so thrilled and grateful to be able to come to Biola, because Biola gave me so much when I was a student here, graduated in 1992, and gave me that foundation to live, to grow, to be a constant learner. And so I'm so grateful to be here. And we're going to talk about this little jobby and what it's done to your life and what it's done to your children's life and your grandchildren's life, perhaps. And this thing that is supposed to be for our convenience, all of a sudden it's like, I gotta, excuse me, I've got it, and then calm down, everyone. Step away from that phone, and let's remember to tend to our most important relationships. And those are our relationships with God, the relationship we have with ourselves and the way that we speak to ourselves, the relationship we have with a husband, with children, with other extended family members. Not so long ago, things were a little bit different technologically. Not so long ago, an application was for employment. A program was a TV show. A cursor used profanity. A keyboard was a piano. Memory was something that you lost with age. A CD was a bank account. Compress was something you did to garbage, not to a file. And if you unzipped anything in public, you'd be in jail for a while. Log on was adding wood to a fire. Hard drive was a long trip on the road. A mouse pad was where a mouse lived, and a backup happened to your commode. Cut, you did with a pocket knife. Paste, you did with a glue. A web was a spider's home, and a virus was the flu. And that is not like that anymore. All those words have different meanings, and what we used to do around a screen is very different today than what we might have done 30 or 40 years ago. My mom and dad immigrated to America from Indonesia. My mom was 21 years old. She was pregnant with me, and they came to New York, where my father had a residency. He's going to be a medical doctor. They had $500 and a suitcase, and they didn't speak any English. And so the way that my mom learned how to speak English was by watching television. She watched a lot of television. And my friend Sheila is here, who we went to school together, and she knows my mom. And my husband James loves to tease her and says, "Mom, you speak the way that you do because you learned from Sesame Street. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's you talk like the count, Mom, And we've all known that television is very influential, right? Like, when TV was big, it was like, what's that going to do to my child's brain? Like, what all that TV watching going to do to my child? And today it's, what are all those games and what's all that screen time going to do to my children, to my grandchildren? But it's very different because in yesteryear, a TV was something you saved your money for. It was like a big piece of furniture, like this big thing in your living room. And everyone knew what people were watching because it was right there in the living room. Are we going to watch Happy Days? Are we going to watch Bonanza? Are we too old? Are we not old enough for Love Boat? These were discussions that had to be made in the home and had to be decided as a family. But today, when someone called, it was like, ring, ring, and you're like, hello? Who is this? I'm sorry, Bobby is not home right now. And you could decide, right? You could filter who your children were talking to, what your children were watching, what your family would choose to do. And today, the landscape is much different. Instead of having a big, huge object that everyone gathers around and decides, let's watch this program together. Instead, everyone's got their own little device. And many times in our homes, we've got a screen in every room. Like there's a computer in one, there's a laptop in another, there's a phone in another. The screens are everywhere. And so now a child, a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, they don't have to get together in the same room to watch a program that they all decide on. Everyone can have their own program, individualized to what they want. And what are we doing? Many times we're living separately under the same roof with our own entertainment, amusement, with our good intentions and our good work to do, but we are living together alone in the same house because we are not gathering like we used to. And so today, my heart is, as you consider your own family relationships with brothers, sisters, coworkers, friends, spouses, children, grandchildren, that you consider, how is technology impacting my relationships, my most important relationships? Is technology bringing me closer together to my family and my friends? Is it helping me become more productive at work? Or is technology separating me from my family and friends? Because we all know technology has a lot of good. Many of you found out about this event because you received an email or you received something technologically that told you, a text, an email, something that said to come. It can be used for good. But I tell you, if you take the average child who you see in the supermarket or waiting in line or waiting around a school in the hall for their mom to pick them up, and you say, oh, what are you doing on your phone? They're not going to say like, oh, I'm memorizing Deuteronomy right now, or I'm working on my times table. This app is amazing. They're not going to say that. Oh, I'm Skyping my grandma. We talk every day here. Most kids, teenagers, if you just say, hey, what are you doing? They're not doing any of those things. And so we have to ask ourselves realistically. Many times we'll give the gadget as a Christmas present or birthday present because we'll think, well, they could do those nice things on this gadget. But the truth is what is really happening on this gadget, and that's why I want to encourage us to step away from the phone. So, I remember when I was a senior in high school, and the year was 1988, and I was working at a 50s cafe, and I was the hostess. And I would drive 15 minutes on the freeway to get to my job. I would park in a parking lot across the street from the cafe. My shift would end sometimes at midnight, 1 a.m. in the morning. I'm a teenager. I'd walk across the street. I'd get in my car and I'd drive home. And I thought, how in the world did I do all that without a cell phone? It was so dangerous, on the cusp of danger, And so it's like, how did I do that? And kids today are so used to having this, right? And what I just encourage you with children and with grandchildren is withhold this, push this back as much as possible so that that child can learn the resilience of, I have a brain and I can figure this out, and I don't need to text for help at the smallest inconvenience, at the smallest bump in the road. And when I came home from my shift at 1 a.m. in the morning, more times than not, I'd find my mother, not worrying, but sitting in the kitchen, ready with the hot chocolate, and she'd be waiting for me, and we'd have our hot chocolate, and she'd ask me, how was my shift at work, and we'd talk. I never thought as a child, oh, I need to get my mother's attention. I need to get her away from that phone. I never thought, like, I wish my mom would look at me instead of looking down at that phone so much. But today's child, today's grandchild, even for the grandparents in the room, because I know I've seen my mom on her phone texting back her friend because she wants to make sure, my friend texted me and I got to get the response right away. And I'm like, Mom, we're sitting like right next to you and you're texting, I got to get the message back, And so in yesteryear, the children and the grandchildren, they never had to fight with this for attention. But today, if you ask the average child, you grandparents are doing awesome because you usually do give the attention. But if you ask the average child, they say, I don't know what's so interesting on that phone, but I wish my mom or my dad would put it down more and they'd look at me more and they'd talk with me more. They may not be able to articulate that at all times, but I believe that is the feeling that many children have. Barna does a lot of research, and these are some of the statistics they found. Recent statistics, and you can kind of answer this in your own mind, how you would have answered the question. When a text or message comes in, I usually stop what I'm doing to check it. 42% of millennials say, yes, I do that, and 36% of all adults say, yes, I do that. I think my personal electronics sometimes separate me from other people. 49% of millennials say that, 35% of all adults say that. I get anxious when my phone dies while I'm out. 40% of millennials say that, and 34% of all adults. And so I just encourage you to kind of consider today your relationship with your phone. What would happen if you didn't have Wi-Fi for the day? What would happen if you went camping and you couldn't use your phone for 3 days? Would you get the shakes, or would you be okay? Would you be relieved? So ask yourself these questions because it is a very noisy world that we live in. And I know you've noticed this because you've seen, look, there's a screen in the people's cars. Look, there's a screen in the restaurant, and now, wow, look, they're on the table. Look, I'm in a waiting room, or I'm in an airport, or I'm any kind of public place, and everyone's got their own little screens, and we've got the news on there's just screens everywhere. It's a very noisy world. But there are things that you can do yourself to make your world a quieter, calmer world while still being friends with technology. So let's consider this noise. I was in Costco the other day, and there was this cart, and there were these two twins sitting in the cart, and they were darling, twin boys. They're probably 2 years old, and they had those Star Wars type t-shirts, but it said, "May the Lord be with you," which I thought was kind of cool. So they were sitting there, right? "May the Lord be with you," and they're sitting there, but they're 2 years old. They both have these huge iPads, both of them, and they're just glued to it, and just and I thought, you know what? That's noise, right? And if children are growing up at 2 years old with constant, when it comes time to read the Bible and to read a book or to do something like that, it's like, I can only do that for 30 seconds, and then I've got to have something more exciting because I'm used to a lot of noise. It's a very noisy world, and we've made a very noisy world for our children. And that's what really I want to caution always parents and grandparents, that for children, they need to see the real apple in the grocery store and like touch it, and not this kind of apple all the time and to be glued to it, you know. And so the kids today are growing up with this constant state of amusement and this constant noise that they need, and it's not healthy for their brains or for their soul. You know, dopamine is that chemical in your brain that says, "Oh, that was fun. Oh, that was fun." You know, and I remember, of course, you all being close to Disneyland. You know, your children, your grandkids love Disneyland. Everybody loves Disneyland. When we told Lucy, she was probably about 4 years old, and I didn't want to tell her too soon, right, so that she wouldn't be so excited for so long. So a week before, I said to her, "Lucy, next week, we are going to take you to Disneyland." Oh, she was so excited. She was so excited. And every morning she'd wake up and she'd say, she must have been younger. She was probably 3, because she would say, "Is today tomorrow? Is today tomorrow?" Because I told her, "Honey, it's going to be in a week." And then I'd say, "It's 6 days. It's 5 days, whatever. Is today tomorrow?" And she so looked forward, you know, to going to Disneyland. And this is kind of how life is meant to be, that you have these events that you look forward to. But today's child, it's not Disneyland once a year, right? It's Disneyland every weekend. And it's a birthday, and it's got to be big. It's got to have jumpers and lights and clouds and balloons. And is that all you got? You know, and why is that? Because they're used to this Disneyland everyday mentality of being entertained all the time. So if your children and your grandchildren say, "This is very boring," you may pat yourself on the back. You can say, "I'm doing a good job with these children, influencing these children, because they need to be bored." Because, as Dr. Archibald Hart writes in his book, Digital Invasion, many of our internet behaviors, such as gambling or gaming on the internet or even Facebooking, can do as much damage to the pleasure center as any powerful drug in your mind. The pleasure center can become so flooded that only the big stimulants can get a message to the pleasure center. Little, ordinary pleasures are ignored because they do not have the power to overcome the flooding. What this all means is that the thrills of our digital world, if abused, can be as addicting as any drug and rob you of the simple joys of life. That so much of it, right, is that it had to be this, and we're missing all these very precious, wonderful moments that God has done. You know, when you have little children or grandchildren, when you walk, you say, "Oh, look at this tree that God has made." Like, you notice things. With adults, you don't. You just walk right past the tree. But when you're with a little 3-year-old, you say, "Look at the tree God has made. Look at the birds and look at the sky." You know, you notice these simple pleasures. But today, many times I see on the way to school, instead of, "Oh, look, you're talking to your children," what are the moms and dads doing? They're like this. And their children are following them, and they're getting their business done, and they're doing their thing, and the whole thing's passing by, and nobody's noticing. So important to keep in mind those simple pleasures. And for us, as adults, it's equally thrilling. I check my email all the time because I think, "Oh, maybe I'm going to get invited to Biola, to Ruby Women." Oh, maybe they need to respond to me and they have a question for me and I need to respond. Oh, maybe and I'm constantly checking. It's like, when we used to check our mail and there'd be personal mail in there. Remember that? And you'd read personal mail and you'd be so excited to go to the mailbox and check the mail. Well, it's the same thing. We also can be addicted to checking our email, to checking our texts, to being involved, to doing these things because we get that little jolt in our system like, oh, wow, look, this is exciting. And so in the same way, we've got to beware of never turning off. Like we've got to have times. We are not created to be on 24/7, to be vigilant. We're not created to be able to drop everything at a dime and respond within 5 minutes. Someone thinks, oh, you didn't text me back. Are you mad at me? No, I'm not mad at you. I'm just doing a completely different activity right now, And so it's very important to give yourself permission and establish those work and life boundaries that you say, I'm off right now, and it is okay not to be so responsive. Of course, we have the 10 Commandments and the commandment of keep the Sabbath holy. Keep that Sabbath holy. Keep one day of your week for rest, for rejuvenation, to be with the Lord, to have a more spiritual basis for your life so that you can have more energy, more to give for those other days. So the average number of times that the office worker will check their email. Can you guess? Per hour. How many times? You can just yell it out. 60. That's very high. Per hour. 20 times. Your 60 is good. 30 times is what they find. And I'm sure there are people, 60 times, that's once a minute. So 30 times every 2 minutes, they're checking their email. And so adults, we're constantly toggling, right, between these tasks. And we're thinking, we're being so efficient. We're being multitasking. We're so good. But really, what we're doing is we keep pulling back our focus, when we'd be so much more productive if we spent the hour in the focused activity we were doing and then told ourselves at the top of each hour, I will check my email or I will check my text messages. Unless you're, obviously if you're meeting someone, you have to keep checking. But otherwise, think focus and get that noise out. 71% of people say they feel overwhelmed with the amount of information, right, that they have to keep up with. And more than half of Americans, 54%, say they have too much information. Like, I don't need this much information. And 6 out of 10 people say all this information is getting in the way of me making a decision. So sometimes I know you're in this room because you want to be savvy, you want to be there, you want to be informed, and that's all good. But sometimes the best thing to do is to turn off that noise at certain times in the day and say, and let your friends know, you know what, I am not accessible on Mondays. Or I will not, if I don't respond back within the hour, please don't think I'm mad at you. I'm just gonna answer those at the end of the day now. Or whatever it is that you would make a system to turn down that noise. And as you turn down the noise, you can turn up the purpose. You can turn up the loving on purpose. So don't worry, at the end of this talk, we will not be taking a collection for your phones or for your tablets. You may keep them, but I want you, before you touch them when you're with people you love, that you think that there's this big caution tape over it. So that you think, you know what, wait, let me not let this distract me from being with the people I'm with. My husband, James, was recently with a friend for lunch, and to his amazement, his friend, it was just the two of them at lunch. His friend got a text message and then proceeded to text back, and it was like a 3-minute deal. Like, it wasn't just like, okay, he texts, they text back, right? And my husband was sitting there like, why am I having lunch with you? And he was tempted to text his friend, like, you want to talk? Because I'm like 2 feet away from you, And so have that caution tape there. And many times it's the person you're with. It might not be you. And so it may be the kind of thing where you ask gently, we don't get to spend that much time together. And I think it'd be great if we just put our phones face down in the center of the table, and whoever touches that phone first is going to pay for lunch, okay? You say, okay. And you have that time, and you talk to each other, and you don't have the distraction of the phone. And to think in your mind, people first and phone second. People first. Whoever is in front of me, people first, and my work, my tablet, my whatever, my social media, my emails, whatever it is I'm doing, that can wait. So I'm writing this book, Growing Up Social, right? And it's got this really cute cover of the kids, and they're on their date, and it's tablecloth, and they're both on their phones. So this is why parents and grandparents, I urge you to buy this, because you don't want your kids to be 20-something and be like, so, want to get married? Okay, emoji, 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 emoji. Like, you don't want that. You want them to be able to talk and do it the old-fashioned way. You want them to do that, okay? So as I'm writing this book, of course, I always tease that I didn't write it on papyrus leaves. Like, I used a computer. And my children would come in the house, and they'd say, oh, Mom, that's so funny. You're writing Growing Up Social, Mom, and you're on the computer right now. That's so funny, Mom. And really, when you work from home, it's a wonderful thing. Because you get to I'll tell my kids over and over again, a lot of moms, they've got to go out to work, but I can take you to school, I can pick you up, but I have to work in between. And when you guys are home from school, for vacation and stuff, I've got to work for a few hours, and you guys, it's okay. So we go through this, but what I realized were two things that really helped me with this, to balance the work-life balance, because you do have to find ways to turn this off, right? Because now your work is with you. It's on your tablet, it's on your phone, it's with you all the time, you're always accessible. And so for us, and I share it with you, it was a simple word, and it was the swivel. So when you're sitting at your computer, or if you're holding your phone, when the loved one comes in, right? Your friend, your loved one, whatever, you swivel your body and you actually look at them and you answer the question or you greet them. Because how many times has someone come into your house and you're like, yeah, how was your work? That's great. Okay, no contact. But if you simply swivel and look at them, it makes a big difference. That all of a sudden it's like, okay, I am important. I have come in the room, and you can say, welcome home. It's great to see you. And just that small swivel will let the people in your life know, oh, good, they see me. I'm not just like this person in the background while my other person is on the phone all the time. The swivel is very important, and it's the same idea when you're on your device and someone's talking to you, to give the common courtesy of looking away from your device, looking up. And you have to train yourself to do this, because we've trained ourselves now to look down all the time and just respond to people because you're doing things. And to say, you know what, this can wait for 30 seconds while I talk to whoever it is who's trying to talk to me, and give them that priority. So remember that people come first and your devices come second, and that it's so important. I was on a recent field trip at school with my daughter, her second grade class. And, we moms are so well-meaning, but this mom is obviously taking pictures all the time. And then in between the pictures, she's texting people. And so every time I looked at her, she was looking down, like she was either taking pictures of the children, which is great, or she was looking down, texting. Lunchtime, texting. And, we're sitting there with the kids, and I just thought, you know what? You are physically present with your child right now, but you're not emotionally, mind, heart, all that stuff is not present. So when you're with someone, be totally with them. And when you're doing work, totally get your work done. And if you can feel like this is a hot potato when you're with people, that will really help you, because believe me, I'll be here and I'll be like, oh, I want to take pictures of you all, and I want to remember you, and I want to put you on Facebook, I will do that. But when I'm done, what I will attempt to do is like put that away and be done with it, because I don't want it constantly there, and I don't want it to take away from the quality of talking and conversation. So think of your phone as a hot potato that you're using it, and then you're trying to ditch it. When you're at a restaurant, when you're in an event, that you want the people to be the centerpiece of your conversation. And if you have grandchildren that come to your house and they want to use grandma's iPad and they want to watch TV shows at grandma, I just want to encourage you to slowly, like let's say if they're used to watching 5 hours at your house, slowly get it to 4 hours, 3.5 hours. And get to that point where you can spend more time, like, let's bake cookies with grandma. Let's talk with grandma. Let's draw with grandma. Let's do things that we don't normally do in everyday life, because all that screen time is everyday life. Let's do special things with grandma. And don't be afraid. Your grandchildren will probably not say, like, Grammy, I love this new change you've made. I feel so much healthier that I'm not watching my cartoons right now. No one's going to thank you. No kid's going to be, they're going to be like, Grandma, what's wrong with you? And they're going to nag you. And when they do that, remember this moment. and say, that's okay, I'm going to stand strong. And you know what? At grandma's house, this is how it goes. It's different at grandma's house. And you do that long enough, and the switch will turn, and that child will come to grandma's house. And 10 years later, they'll say, I loved coming to my grandma's house because we played board games. My kids play Hollywood Rummy with my parents. They played card games. They do crazy. My parents got crazy when they got grandchildren. My dad, who's a retired physician, he puts plastic cups all throughout the house, like targets. And then he and my son do rubber band shooting, and they like shoot all the plastic cups like all throughout the house, and they pretend they're different countries, like today I'm Russia, today you're China, and they like have competitions, and I'm like, you're crazy, like who does this? So be creative without any screens with your times, with your children, with your grandchildren, because those are the things that will be remembered. And also with your spouse. I was speaking at a youth conference, and a father walked towards me, and I thought, oh, for sure, he's going to tell me like his daughter is addicted to her phone, or the son is having trouble with whatever, But he's like, it's not my children. My children are great. It's my wife. I was like, it's your wife. And he's like, every time. He's like, it started so innocently. Like she was on Twitter and she would send messages to her friends and it meant so much to them. So she just thought, wow, I can encourage women this way. So she just kept tweeting everyone verses and encouragement. And he says, well, go on dates. And she's in the car. And we're sitting in the car and she's just tweeting her friends. And then we're at the actual dinner and she's taking pictures of the food and then tweeting her friends about it and tweeting. And he's like, my wife is just so wonderful in every way. Except for Twitter, He's like, my friends call her the Twitter queen because she's always on Twitter. So I encourage us as ladies, may those who know us not say, oh, there goes the social media queen. There goes the Twitter queen. There goes the Facebook queen, always posting her stuff. It's not bad to be on those sites. But when it interferes with your date night, with your husband, then this is too much. I've got to do something about this. And then the other thing you can do to turn down noise is to go outside, is to spend more time in the beautiful, great outdoors, which, of course, kids today are spending less and less time outdoors and more time inside with their screens. And, they did this series of tests where the subjects were given very mentally fatiguing tests to measure, like, how much could they remember, how, your brain, what could it do? And then in the middle of the test, they told one half of the group to take their hour break walking in a nearby park and then told them to come back. And then the other half, they told them to go to the city streets and walk around for an hour and come back. And after they completed the test, after that 1 hour break, the ones who took the walk in the park did significantly better than the ones that were on the noisy streets for the hour. And there's something, doesn't it make sense? The Psalms, all throughout the Bible, the heavens declare the glory of God. And when you are in nature and when you are seeing the mountain, when you are seeing the lake, you're seeing the river, seeing the ocean, it's like, oh, it's so rejuvenating. So make that plan to go outside, to be outside with your children, with your grandchildren, with your family, because it makes a big difference. Because the internet cannot provide the calming experiences that nature can, that God's creation can give. And spend that time with God. I found myself at red lights, right? Because this is my little cup holder. And True Confessions, red light, I check, it's like, why do I need a red light to check if I got a message? So what I've tried to do, and the reason I say try is many times we'll make these choices, but then what happens to us? We slip back in our old habits. And when that happens, I want to encourage you, don't be discouraged, just keep going, just keep pressing forward. So at the red light, I say to myself, don't touch your phone, and instead make that a prayer to God at your red light. Say, Lord, help me to be still and know that you're with me. Lord, what do you have to speak to me today? Lord, your servant's listening. That, wow, we could reclaim all these little moments that we fill with checking this, that instead we could check in with God. In my book, 31 Days to Becoming a Happy Mom, this is my latest book. One of the chapters is called God, Not Google. And what it means by that is many times when we have a problem, right? Our child has a runny nose, or we don't know what to do with this science project, or, you've got an awful thing at work happening, whatever it is, what do? We Google the question, and then we find out what the answer is, and then we're like, okay, good, it's the flu. It's like we figure it out. But we don't pray because we just figure, I got my answer. And in the times where we used to say, depend on God, oh, God, give us the answer, now we are like, we don't need the answer. I can just Google the answer myself and I got it. And truly, in everyday life, that happens. That the things that we used to think, let's ask others for advice, or let's go to God and ask him what to do, that we think, oh, it's okay, I read an article about that 2 days ago. I know exactly what to do. And there's nothing wrong with Googling the answer or reading articles. It's great. But we must go to God first and then to Google. Every problem that faces us, let that be our little go-to saying. God first, Google second. Lord, what should I do with the situation at work? What do I do with my children? What do I do with these grandchildren? Should I go on this mission trip? Should I give this money? God first, then Google, because we lift up our eyes to the hills from whence comes our help, comes from the Lord God. But today's generation, we're so used to this. I lift up my eyes to my pocket, from whence comes my help, the holder of all information. I'll just ask this where to go, And so we've got to redirect ourselves, because the scripture says in Deuteronomy 6, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. You will love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And we have to ask ourselves, is this helping us love God more? Or, because it can. Or is this helping us love God less in our generation? And you think about the generation that we live in. This is what it continues to say in Deuteronomy. These commandments that I give you are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands, bind them on your foreheads, write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. But like we talked about before, what's happening on the way to school, we're not necessarily saying the word of God to our children. We're holding our phones, and our kids are holding their phones too. And before bedtime, I've heard so many moms tell me, oh, Arlene, I feel so bad. I read to the first child. I read to the second child. But by the third child, that tablet just did wonders. And that child would hold that tablet, and that tablet read out loud to him. And my third child, I never read to that child. They just go to bed with a tablet and they go to bed, and it's what we've got to do as parents, as grandparents, say, wait a minute, these precious times, many times when a child first wakes up, a teen first wakes up, an adult first wakes up, the first thing we do is we reach for this, our messages, our texts. For a child, they might turn on the TV for a cartoon, they might start playing a video game, and we realize, wow, these moments when you first wake up, when you lie down to bed, many times they're taken up by technology, screen time, where these are precious times for parents, grandparents to impress upon their children the Word of God, to impress upon them that they are loved. And screen time can take that away, because all those little moments when you walk, when you get up, when you lie down, tie them around your house, that instead of the Word of God saturating our families, many times the screens are saturating our families, and what's being shown on the screen is not glorifying to God. Obviously, screens can be used to glorify God, but many times what we're watching is not impressing God's worldview on our children and grandchildren. It's impressing the world's, the cultural worldview. And of course, the average child, as you know, they're watching 7 hours of screens per day. 7 hours of screens per day. And what it means is, as a child born today, by the time they are 7 years old, will have spent a full year in front of the television set of 24-hour days. A full year of their life just watching a screen. And of course, with screen time also comes addiction, that's something that is a real possibility for our children, for our grandchildren. China, Taiwan, Korea, they have internet use disorder, which is a mental disorder, and they check into clinics just like you would for alcohol or for gambling or something else. And how it is defined is 38 hours a week or more of gaming that you have to game, that you've tried to stop, but you can't. You lose other interests, kind of personal hygiene goes to the side, that it is harming to you, and that you have to have a bigger thrill to get that dopamine hit. So it's got to be more gaming. It's got to be more intense. It's just got to keep going. And so a lot of young people are ending up in treatment centers because they can't live and function in a normal life when they're spending 40 hours a week gaming and they're supposed to make a living this way. There was a senior in high school, a family that I talked to, a senior in high school named Michael, and they had a graduation party for him, and all his family and friends were there. And about 10 minutes into it, he went up to his room. His mom went upstairs and, Michael, this party is for you. Come on downstairs. And he said, well, if it's for me, I'd rather be playing games with my friends, so I'm just going to do that. And he stayed upstairs in his room, and the party dissipated after a few minutes because the guest of honor was not there. And it's an extreme case, but it's a cautionary tale that we don't want our children and our grandchildren so wrapped up in this that they cannot function in normal life. In the book, Growing Up Social, Dr. Gary Chapman of the 5 Love Languages and I wrote this book, and it's our heart that kids would emotionally be ready to be adults. And many times if they're 7 hours a day on this, they don't have the emotional skills necessary because they've never practiced them. Because you don't have to be empathetic or deal with your anger or be patient or be appreciative when you're playing on this 7 hours a day. So you can read this more carefully here, and there's a quiz in it, is your child getting too much screen time? But I just want to give you the 5 A+ skills that we encourage children and grandchildren to have. The skill of affection. Can they show love? Not just like a little emoji, but do they really know how to show love and give love? If you're familiar with the love languages, one of them is physical touch. So your children, your grandchildren, your spouse, they feel loved when they're hugged, when you sit close, when you cuddle. My daughter Lucy is this way. When she was 2, she'd come into our room, huggies, the first thing she'd say in the day, huggies. We knew, okay, that's your love language. Well, if a child's love language is touch, how many of us snuggle up to our child while they're watching TV or playing a video game? Good job, honey, way to go. When we see a child playing a video game or watching TV, we're like, this is our time to catch up and get stuff done. Like, we are out of there, And so you have to ask yourself, how is technology impacting the way I am showing affection towards my family members? The second one is appreciation, gratitude. And screens will teach you that things should be instant, things should be easy, you should have a lot of choice, and life is not like that, is it? So when we go, oh, this is taking too long, why are we like that? Because this shows us everything instantly. And it fights against appreciation. It fights against gratitude. So appreciation is another skill that we all need. The next one is anger management, that we would learn how to manage our anger. Many times we as parents give in to giving our children this because we don't want the tantrum. So we just say, just take it. But the truth is our children and we have to learn how to manage our anger in a healthy way. The next one is apology, to learn how to give and receive apology and not just text, sorry, and think that fixes everything, or unfriend, because I don't want to deal with that. That's not how life works. We've got to teach our children and ourselves how to truly apologize. And the last one is attention. How can we have more attention? The attention span in America has dropped 40% since the year 2000, and I'm sure you could ask even Biola professors and ask them, what's your student like today compared to 20 years ago? And I would be surprised if they said, oh yeah, they have the same attention span as they did 20 years ago. I think they'd say it's harder to keep their attention span because they're used to everything being woo and changing. And so we've got to fight against that by embracing boredom. As Dr. Chapman says, there's a time in every child's life and every adult's life for a bucket of water and a stick and nothing else. And just roll that thing around. Just give yourself some space to think, that we all need that. So the next time your grandchild says, I'm bored, you pat yourself on the back and they ask you to play a game or a video game or to watch a show, and you say, there's a great book I'd like you to look at, and get them reading, because that really helps them with their attention span. As we close this first section of our time together, I want to show you a video. And it's a short video of my family because they are very cheap labor. So you'll see my husband, James, and my 3 kids. And I just want you to imagine, if you have children at home, you can imagine, which scenario resembles your home more and what do you want. And if you have grandchildren or nieces or nephews, to be thinking of them and how screens, because I know in this room you're so interested in putting God's hand of love and putting your fingerprints on the next generation. And I think a huge way you can put your fingerprints on the next generation is to help them, guide them, that this is not where it's all at. that this is simply a tool that must be managed, but that if we have ourselves and our children just mesmerized with this all the time, that we are missing. It's not so much what it is, it's what it makes us miss. And it's very important for you to be in that important place to help your families and guide them in this area. So let's watch.
Is technology bringing your family closer? Or is it driving you apart? Do you stare at your phone, but not into your child's eyes? Do you ever wonder, are my children spending too much time with screens? Are you? The more a child is involved in screen time, the less time there is for interaction with parents, siblings, and friends.
Good night.
Good night. Could there be a better way? A digital road less traveled, where screen time is part of life, not most of life. Are your family moments enjoyed or missed? Don't let a screen take your place.
Good night, Mother.
Good night. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Growing Up Social, Raising Relational Kids in a Screen-Driven World by Gary Chapman and Arlene Pellicane.
So when you open up the heart of your children, the heart of your grandchildren, open up the heart of a Biola student, you want to see the Word of God, right, impressed there. You don't want to have an Apple icon in there. You want the Word of God and the hand of people who love them to be impressed upon them. And so I just encourage you, be ambassadors to the people around you and they're in your circle of influence, and lovingly say, you know, there's a better way. It's okay for your kids to be different. My children are very different. They will go to public school in San Diego, 1,200 kids in their elementary school. My son does not play Minecraft. He's never played Minecraft, which makes him really weird. And so, but what's funny, he'll come and his friends will say, Ethan, how do you do it without playing video games and without watching TV all summer long? Like, how did you survive? And he'll say to them, Mom, I'll say to them, how can you sit around at home like watching video games all day long? Like, I ride my bike and I ride rollerblades and I play the piano and I learn martial arts and I read books, and how can you not know who Winston Churchill is? Like, he's just like, are you kidding me? You know. So it's okay to raise your children differently and your grandchildren differently. We are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world. It is okay not to use this like everyone else uses it. They did a study because many parents and grandparents were afraid, what if we don't do it? Our kids might never have jobs because they'll be like, what's a computer? So don't worry. They did this study at UCLA where they took 12 people who use the internet all the time, scanned their brains. Took 12 people who never use the internet, scanned their brains while they were doing internet searches. And yes, their brains looked very different. The people that were accustomed to the internet showed that they were quick with their decision making. They saw great periphery vision where the other brains were just dormant in that area. Well, they took the non-users and they had them go online for 1 hour a day for 5 days. And then they did the study again at UCLA. And when they scanned their brains, after 5 hours of internet use, their brains looked exactly the same as the users. And I'm telling you, technology is so easy to learn for children, for grandchildren, for young people. They'll get it. So in 5 hours, they got it. And my son, if I give him 5 hours with a video game, I think he'll have a lot of fun. But another peer of my son who's playing video games for every minute my son is reading, and I give him a book that is of his level, in his interest. How long is he going to last reading that book? My son's going to outgame him for sure. My son will be able to game for 5 hours. The boy will be able to read for 15 minutes. And so these emotional skills, these deeper thinking skills, they cannot be taught here. And they must be taught from us, and we must tell the generation after us. We must give them warnings about this, and we must lovingly show by our own lives and our example that you are more important than this, and whenever you're with me, you will be first. You will be first, and I will use this as a tool, and I will not become a slave to it. And with Psalm 115, our God is in heaven, he does whatever pleases him, but their idols are silver and gold made by human hands. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see. They have ears but cannot hear, noses but cannot smell. They have hands but cannot feel, feet but cannot walk, nor can they utter a sound with their throats. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them. All you Israelites, all you Biolans, trust in the Lord, for he is your help and shield. The Lord remembers us and will bless us. He will bless those who fear the Lord, small and great alike. May the Lord cause you to flourish, both you and your children. May you be blessed by the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And after we're all done today, I'd love to meet you, and of course throughout the morning. And Growing Up Social is a great book for your kids, for your grandkids. 31 Days to Becoming a Happy Mom. For all of my 31 Days books, I interview a lot of people. So whether it's Kevin Lehman or David Jeremiah, I interview some really amazing people to be in the books, and they give great advice for that mom who's pulling out her hair and wondering what to do. And then you probably through the titles, you think, wow, that woman expects a lot of us from 31 days. Like a lot can happen in a month. So 31 Days to Younger You, I interviewed people 40 to 100 and asked them, like, how did you do that? Like, how are you driving at 100? And how are you ocean swimming for miles at 60? Like, I asked them, like, how did you do that? So that's very inspiring to embrace every season. 31 Days to a Happy Husband is my husband's favorite. It is written to the woman, and it's the whole idea that our husbands can be like wallpaper, and we kind of forget that they're there. And so it's 31 days to kind of put him back in the spotlight and dream again. So my husband, every 6 months, he's like, you need to reread your own book. I'm like, okay, babe, you're right. And then 31 Days to Becoming a Happy Wife is regardless of what's going on in your life, whatever your circumstances, how can you choose joy in your marriage and you choose to really relish being a wife? So all the books are $10. The pack is $45. And it's been such a joy to be with you. Thank you so much.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.